The Oboz Rimrock low top hiking shoe. If you guys haven't heard of Oboz before, maybe check out my other videos. There's a reason why they're kind of exclusively the only piece of footwear that I put around my feet. I think way too often, way too critically about outdoor gear, how it's supposed to perform, what it does for your body. And I'm a true believer that Oboz also thinks equally, if not more so, hard about such topics. And they're very smart. I know the brand's new, but the people behind it are not at all new to the footwear industry. So keep that in mind. Don't just go trusting other people's word, because most people are just assuming that brands that are already in existence know what they're doing, when in reality there's a lot of marketing pumped into footwear, and lots of times they're telling you stuff that is merely a stretch of the truth, something along those lines. That's like 3 videos worth of information there, so I'm gonna stop and just start talking about the Rimrock, like this video is supposed to be about. Beautiful low top, non-waterproof hiking shoe. Making sure we're in frame, word. And yeah, so let's get started. Philosophy of use on this super badass hiking shoe is gonna be just that. You know, you're gonna be on trails more or less, some type of surface you need traction from. If you're walking every day on sidewalks, walking your dog, while these are gonna be comfortable, they're way too much for what you need. So maybe look into a different Oboz option, the Arete perhaps. This is definitely a shoe that's built to protect your foot from things that are abnormal to, everyday encounters. Flat surfaces are not something that, you need this type of shoe for. What I mean by that is something I'll get into in the midsole, outsole part of this review. So the construction of this shoe is a nubuck leather. That's kind of, shoes kind of take a tactic to have a stiffer, more rigid piece of material perhaps to allow structure to the form of the upper of the shoe. And then they'll back it with usually a lighter weight, more breathable piece of textile, something along those lines. It could all just be aesthetics. I mean, I've never actually had a shoe that was all mesh, like all fabric, not hold my foot quite, I don't know, forget I just said any of that. This is nubuck leather. This is a high abrasion textile. What they mean by that is that it's woven quite densely out of a thick yarn, so it's pretty tough. Not exactly the most malleable piece of material. It is, I mean, obviously it's a fabric, but it's definitely stiffer than your average mesh. And what that's going to help you do is breathe a little bit, way more so than if this whole shoe were covered in this leather. But on the flip side, because it's a non-waterproof shoe, if you were to treat the outside with some type of waterproofing treatment, you could actually dunk your foot underwater quickly, get it out of there before it actually starts to absorb into here. If you have a big open mesh, some shoes, they have like a very open mesh, running shoes, lots of times you'll see that. And that is near impossible to treat for water repellency. Water will always absorb into a very open mesh. This is kind of a happy balance between resistance from the elements while not totally suffocating your foot with a waterproof membrane, to make it not waterproof. So what I will say is that I almost wish these were waterproof, because I don't exactly notice that they're that much more breathable than, say, a non-waterproof shoe. Or a waterproof shoe. I apologize. This is a non-waterproof shoe. That's just my mileage. I am moving and grooving when I'm in these things, hiking high peaks in the Adirondacks and things, so maybe there isn't a shoe that's breathable enough for the human foot when you're putting out that much energy. But as far as I'm concerned, if you stand in water in here, you're gonna get wet, and if you're not wearing the proper sock, that's gonna suck. For me, I don't care. I have a proper footwear sock system. I'll walk all day with my feet drenched. Not a big deal. Some people it is. I think they're going to lose sales because they don't offer a waterproof version of this. But I don't know. That's kind of, you can choose your own battles there. I bought it and I love it and I wear it all the time. I guess I couldn't care less if it's waterproof now that I'm thinking about it. So that's the upper. You do have some aesthetic stitching going out through there. Kind of cool. Gives us some depth. And you also have a TPU, externally three-dimensionally molded heel counter. This is a real sweet aspect to their shoes. This one is a little bit different in design, a little bit thinner, more, I guess there's just less material involved in the heel counter in this shoe than, say, the Sawtooth. And it does seem like this isn't quite as stiff. So I guess it might not function 100% in the sense that it's going to keep your foot from rolling outside of the where the sole is underneath your foot. But I think it does a great job of maintaining the shape of the shoe. Aside from that, it looks awesome. You could totally jam your foot in between rocks and things, and these materials are absolutely going to withstand a huge beating. Lots of people, they look at things and they're like, oh, all these stitches, they're going to bust. I doubt it. If you see this, stitch bust open and it actually compromises the fit of the shoe and not just compromises your opinion of how it looks. Like if it rips, clearly, yeah, it's going to be ripped. It's going to look like garbage after that. But if you don't care, if all you care about is the performance, guess what? I'm pretty sure I could rip half these seams open and it wouldn't make a difference on how the shoe performs. I feel like I'm in a ranting mood. I can't wait to watch this review and see if I'm going to post it or not. So, aside from that, that's the upper. One metal eyelet for the very top one there. One thing that's pretty important is that the eyelet is all the way through. Some shoes, the fabric on the inside will be covering the eyelet, so like as if it were just attached to this outer fabric and then this was sewn over the back of it. Hard to explain, but more or less, Oboz is taking care of you. Because this metal's showing, they made the tongue wider. So when you're fitting this shoe, you should have the tongue overlapping the inside of where that metal eyelet is. That way this stiff chunk of fabric that is stiff because that metal grommet is in there, you want this piece of the tongue to protect your foot from that. Aside from that, all the other eyelets are either a sewn loop onto webbing with leather or just webbing. And I think that's totally adequate. You can tell my foot is very low volume. This is, I'm pretty much bottomed out when I'm tightening them. Now, I'm not 100% bottomed out so that it's still functional. If I saw these touching, I would then shove a piece of foam in there to readjust the fit or something, or put a shim under my foot, who knows. Aside from that, I think it's very aesthetically appealing. I love the color. I'm a 20-year-old male, and this seems to be, kind of that mid-range of it's not too loud, it's not too, conservative, it's not too anything. It can fit a variety of different personalities, just as the shoe itself, and perhaps the person who's wearing it. I think that's enough about the upper. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. You can decide for yourself whether it's function or fashion. The midsole, the foam right here, beautiful aspect. It's a dual density midsole. And one thing I absolutely love about this design is that right where the rubber comes up on the side, you can see that the foam has kind of made a cushion. So if I can get this moving and grooving here, you can see that that little bubble of foam moves along with this and separately from the rest of the foam. What that is allowing this shoe to do is last way longer than it may have been if the rubber were just adhered to this chunk of foam, because you have virtually no fighting of the glue. Everything's moving together. This whole pod, foam and rubber, and the TPU chassis hanging out there, it's all moving as one. So you have very little resistance against the adhesives, and I would imagine you'll see very little delamination because of that. Awesome job, Josh. Can't even say that enough. That's too sweet. Same deal on the inside. Those little, I guess, pillows of foam surrounding where the rubber's adhered, they allow a very, very nice cushion, I guess, a buffer, so that this can remain adhered to the foam. So that's cool, but aside from that, you have EVA foam, nothing but it. So this shoe is going to be highly cushioned, especially because you have such an aggressive sole. So where your foot is encountering the ground, I would argue, is a relatively low surface area of rubber, providing high amounts of traction, potentially low amounts of slip resistance. So if you were to step on like a laminated smooth floor, tile even, if it were soaking wet, this is not going to provide slip resistance on something like that. It's just not designed to. I'm sure it would be quite adequate with most shoes, but if you're, say, working in a restaurant where there's greasy tile floors, you want to look for something that has more rubber touching the ground. This is designed to penetrate into dirt and cling to surfaces that are very abnormally shaped. So that's just what it's designed for. It can't be great at everything. So if you're trying to walk around, say, a hospital, and you're trying to wear this shoe and you come across a wet puddle of something, don't assume that this amazingly traction surface on trail is also going to stop you from slipping on tile. It just won't. So with that being said, getting back into the midsole, when you have more weight distributed through less rubber on the ground, you're going to have more shock into the foam, allowing this foam to cushion more so. So I would argue that this shoe is a highly cushioned shoe, which is good and bad depending on how you're looking at it. For me, I like it. Cushioning is great when you're walking on trails, surfaces that are all over the place, hard, soft. You don't want to be, injured by it, and you don't want to introduce your foot to something that it's not used to. So having that kind of void space, this buffer that's cushioning, is great. But I would say it's on the higher side, the lower density, I guess, of foam. So very cushioned. I guess, yeah, no, it's not going to last as long as a polyurethane midsole hiking boot, whatever. This is very much a performance shoe, not something that's going to last for 3 years of you wearing it every day. So, geez, I'm rambling. What are we even at? I don't even want to look at the time. 13 minutes. Great. So stay tuned for part 2. Continuing on in part 1, however. Getting away from the midsole, it is dual density, but you can't, they didn't differentiate with colors, so we're just going to have to trust them on that one, that there is 2 different densities of foam somewhere in here. Can't exactly tell you which one's where. So aside from that, boomtown. Getting into the outsole. This is the Granite Peaks outsole. Totally sweet. This is just something, I bought this shoe strictly so I could have this traction surface. And I plan on buying the Traverse and the Traverse Mid, in the future, purely because of this traction surface. This interface with the ground is incredible. You will just not slip on anything. Again, as long as it's in need of traction and not slip resistance. It's a whole nother story. I might have a separate video on what the difference between those two is, but just imagine it. Traction is more providing stability on like dirt and mud potentially. Slip resistance is trying to provide stability on a surface that is very slick. Yeah, hard to differentiate the difference there, but I'm trying not to make this video be 45 minutes long. They're saying that this is a 4mm deep tread. I haven't measured it, but I would maybe argue that it's deeper, if anything. In some places, I mean, obviously here you're going to have super deep amounts of tread there, but what I really enjoy about the tread pattern, and particularly the valleys in between the tread peaks, is that they've eliminated the rubber. So here and under here, it's just like a regular shoe where you have the lug and then you have rubber in between, in the valley, if you would. On the sides here, you see that there's rubber eliminated here and there, and even diving in when there is rubber, the rubber has been cut out to allow for more depth in between the lug peaks. So totally an awesome idea there. It basically shaves away weight by eliminating rubber and adds tread depth by basically, I guess, it adds depth in between the treads, making the treads potentially able to penetrate deeper into the ground if it were a soft surface. Holy man, that's a mouthful. Yeah, I guess that's a very smart idea. I guess diving back into the midsole, because I never really touched upon it, this piece of orange here, you can see a little bit of orange there, and there. You can see it here. That's plastic, or TPU, and it's popping its eyes out right there, and up here. So what that tells me is there is a stiff piece of plastic going underneath all these chunks of rubber up to this one. So you're going to have incredible stone bruise protection under the forefoot of this shoe. It's just incredible how much this disperses shock side to side. If you were to step on something sharp, it's going to disperse that shock and handle it so that it doesn't just penetrate into your foot and bruise you over the course of a long hike. With that being said, it's a low top hiking shoe, so you don't want it to feel like a hiking boot when you're wearing it. You don't want it to just not bend at all. So that's why you have these little cutouts here where there is no TPU. It allows the shoe to flex in those areas. And I guarantee you these little areas are very strategically placed in relation to where your foot will be so that this shoe behaves very much like your foot normally would. Oboz just completely understands the relationship between a foot and a shoe and what that needs to remain in order for the shoe to be comfortable. Most discomfort complaints are just due to the shoe not mimicking a natural foot's movements, and it's very evident that if you're trying to protect a piece of your body, you should have a piece of equipment that very much mimics its motions, if it is a mechanical mechanism like your foot indeed is. You wear gloves, guess what? If you held a glove up by itself, it looks like a hand. It probably is pre-bent like your fingers normally bend. Your fingers don't bend backwards, so it's probably going to have some padding on the outside. You know, it just makes sense for how a glove would be made. What do you know? Your foot is just as much a mechanical device as your hand is, so Oboz takes care of you there. As far as the shape of the tread, I could get into it, but they just know what they're doing. It's totally sweet, very multi-directional. The tread's awesome. I'm totally getting ahead of myself because still in the midsole, I forgot to mention that you have a nylon shank going throughout there, as well as it's board lasted. So just an incredible amount of stability you will have in this shoe, basically. Yeah, that's where we're at there. Totally love the Granite Peaks outsole. One other thing I greatly appreciate is this kind of a feature in the heel area. Running out of battery too, so we might be doing part 2 pretty soon. But this valley is designed to position your foot in the heel strike, and it is indeed off-center, and that's beautiful. If you take a glimpse of your foot as you're heel striking, I guarantee you're leaning a little bit more on the outside of your foot, meaning you're stepping like this, not like this. Some people will be like a naturally ridiculous pronator or whatever, and they'll wear the insides of their shoes out. But for the most part, people are stepping slightly on the outside of their foot, and their outsoles mimic and promote that type of movement. It's unbelievable the amount of comfort that these can provide. What else do we got? The performance, I already spoke about it. You'll see another video of me hiking around in these things, and it's without a doubt that they provide a ton of performance in their intended purpose. Again, trails, hiking, through hiking, all the above. What I will say, as far as the fit, the heel, this little chunk up here, by the way, this piece of webbing needs to be longer. It's definitely a little bit too tight to easily get your hand under there to pull the shoe on. It's cool. I like how wide it is, but there needs to be more slack there. Aside from that, it seems like the structure of the heel ends right about there. This upper part, unfortunately, just kind of flops around. It doesn't do much to hug your heel, the upper part of your heel. Not that your heel doesn't remain in the shoe very well, but I think that if this piece of leather were a little bit higher up, that this would remain a little bit more structured, potentially leading to better heel fitting. I have not had any heel slip issues though, so I don't want to make that scare people, but it is something that's worth mentioning. As far as the overall volume of the shoe and the fit there, as you can see, I'm quite bottomed out. I'm definitely a medium width, no wider than most, and I'm a size 14 foot. I think what happens is that as you get into these big sizes, everything gets kind of inflated, even when it maybe shouldn't. Maybe I do have a very low volume foot or something, but I find it's very rare that someone with a size 14 foot has like a huge fat foot. There are those exceptions, and for those there's New Balance shoes, but I feel like having these laces so close together here, you could maybe bring them a little bit further apart and they would still fit the majority of people. So that's that. I don't know, I can't really speak much. If you really have a problem with that and you know that you're notorious for having your laces bottom out, buy the Traverse low top, because the laces are specifically further apart, the eyelets that is, and there's way less likely chance that you'll bottom them out from your foot being too low volume for the shoe. Me, I couldn't care less. When I stretch out this leather enough to where they bottom out, I'm going to take a chunk of foam, shove it in here, and it's going to trick the shoe into thinking my foot's bigger than it is. No big deal. That's how I roll. Yeah, I apologize. This review's kind of all over the place. I just started filming. I normally write a sheet down with all this info and stuff, but I'm very much a fan of how organic a video can be, and that's what I like to do. So you guys are seeing it raw. From the rear, you can tell that there's asymmetry going on here. By no means is the shoe the same, left to right. So what that does is further enhances the cushioning aspect I was talking about before with this kind of cutout. It's going to promote different cushioning on one side of your foot than the other, because I guarantee you're introducing different shocks to one side of your foot than the other as you walk. And yeah, just an unbelievable design. They keep blowing my mind year after year. Oboz just gets it. This is my very crude review of the Oboz Rimrock, purely because I think it's an outrage. There are no videos yet on YouTube of this, so you're going to see this one and you're going to stay tuned. Hopefully I will have another one, maybe slightly more in-depth or slightly less in-depth. I will definitely have some testing videos so you guys can see this thing in action. But all I can say is that if you've worn Oboz before and you had success with their fit and your foot, and you like the look of this shoe, you can safely order it and have it perform for you on the trail. So there's Oboz, Rimrock, Boomtown. Don't forget too, they include some of the best insoles in their shoes, the B-Fit Deluxe. I said some of the best because I have another one of the best in there already. Whole nother story, but if you order this shoe by itself, it will feel awesome. It will be incredibly supportive, considering it's a shoe right out of the box. And yeah, go have fun.